Let's preview the Detroit Tigers for 2026 up next on Fantasy Baseball Today. Welcome to On the Beat, our mini team preview series here at Fantasy Baseball Today. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Jason Beck, who covers the Tigers for MLB.com. Make sure to give him a follow on X at BeckJason and on Blue Sky at jasonbeck.bsky.social. And let's start off with a quick look at the Tigers offseason. They brought back Gleyber Torres. They signed pitcher Drew Anderson to a one-year deal with a club option for 2027. He spent 2 years in Japan and then 2 years in Korea, now returning to the major leagues. They re-signed Kyle Finnegan. They brought in Kenley Jansen. But it feels like the Tigers are kind of in limbo right now. As of recording this, Tarik Skubal is still on the team, but they have this messy arbitration case that's going on, and he has been subject to many trade rumors. So what do you think winds up happening here, I guess, with Skubal and the Tigers heading into 2026?
Well, I mean, honestly, I don't think the arbitration case impacts whether he gets traded or not. I mean, he's going to play next year, and unless they do a deal somewhere, he's going to play for the Tigers. It's just a matter of what salary he's playing at. There's been a lot of examples over the years, especially in recent seasons, of players who have gone to arbitration hearings with their teams and then gone out, played for those teams, and had big seasons. And in the case of guys like Vladimir Guerrero Jr., ended up re-signing with those teams. Now, Vlad's case happened a couple years before free agency, not going into his contract season. But in any case, it had no impact. And, Tarik is a pro. He has been professional with the Tigers over the years. I do not expect this to impact his relations with the team, no matter how it goes. So from that standpoint, I don't expect it will have any impact other than on their payroll.
All right, let's get into some big fantasy questions here for the Tigers. And Kevin McGonigle is one of the top prospects in all of baseball. I got to watch him out in the Arizona Fall League. He was awesome out there. He actually won league MVP. Do you think McGonigle is up on opening day with the Detroit Tigers?
I think he's got a real shot. I know, there will be a lot of talk about, do you want to use up his full year? Do you want to buy an extra year going into free agency? The fact of the matter is, if he's good enough to make this team, I think they're going to be, very tempted, if not compelled, to carry him and give him a shot. They gave Cole Keith a shot on the team. Granted, he signed that long-term deal, going in. They've been open to, giving him a good long look. They are as intrigued by McGonagle as the fans are. The prospect promotion incentive, which gives teams a shot at getting an extra draft pick if guys who stay on the team for the whole year or close to it, finish in the top two in terms of awards votings. That provides another incentive. I think, if he shows himself to be the best shortstop candidate in spring training, I suspect that he will be on the opening day roster and getting a good long look. If they're going to make the most of this season, if they get a good spring out of McGonagle, I think that he fits right into what they want to do, particularly if he shows that combination of play discipline with impact hitting that they have been preaching for the last few years since Scott Harris came on board as president of baseball operations.
Let's get into the bullpen here. They brought back Kyle Finnegan, who was great after the trade last season. Obviously, Tigers helped him make a few tweaks there, and he was really, really good down the stretch. They signed Kenley Jansen. Will Vest was also great for the Tigers last season. Is Kenley Jansen definitely the team's closer? I know this might not be up to you, I guess kind of your read on the situation, but A.J. Hinch has liked to mix things up here or there, but now he has a future Hall of Fame candidate in Kenley Jansen. So do you just think Jansen is the closer, or do they continue to maybe mix and match there at the back end of the bullpen?
I suspect he'll get the first shot. I think, they clearly would have, they clearly talked about his situation before he signed as a free agent. So he knows what he's getting into. There should be no mystery about what's going on from his standpoint. You don't sign a guy with his career accomplishments, especially to that type of contract, and then shuffle him into like 7th or 8th inning setup. I think, as long as he looks right going into the season, he should be able to get at least the bulk of the looks in the 9th inning, I would think. And then how it unfolds from there will I would think, be up to performance based. So, we'll see where it goes from there. But I think given where he is in his career, and particularly given the milestones, I think that, unless he struggles in spring training, that he will get the bulk of the opportunities.
All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back right after this.
This isn't just combat. It's cinema.
Ready or not, here I come. Let's go!
Are you not entertained?
The new home of UFC, Paramount Plus.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball today. We're previewing the Detroit Tigers with Jason Beck, who covers the team for MLB.com. Let's get into a sleeper here. Jason, who do you have for the Tigers in 2026?
Well, I think Parker Meadows is kind of a pretty strong sleeper candidate here. He came into last spring training with a ton of momentum coming off of that encouraging postseason in 2024. He looked like a guy on the rise. And then he had the weird nerve issue in his arm, cost him a couple months, came back, never really seemed to get on track, had another, different injury that slowed him during the summer, came back, looked good on defense, looked good in the field, still had a ton of athleticism, but just never seemed to get right at the plate. He's had a full off season to do his normal workout routine. The potential is still there. This wasn't some sort of career-threatening injury by any indication. It's just a matter of, can he get back to what he did well there down the stretch back in 2024? And there should be nothing in his way of doing that. This is a big year for him because, Max Clark is going to be knocking on the door at some point here in 2026. So this is the time for him to get his career going again and to be able to establish a spot there in the lineup.
That's a name that fantasy players have been looking at for years now, Parker Meadows, just thinking that, if everything clicks, he can be a 20-20 guy and give some power and some speed, maybe a little bit of a lower batting average. But yeah, there's definitely athleticism there, and would like to see him stay healthy and see what he could do over the course of a full season. What about a breakout? Who do you have for the Tigers this season?
Well, Cole Keith screams breakout to me. He's kind of, His first couple of big league seasons have been somewhat quiet. He had decent stretches, but the end of season numbers have never really stood out. But quietly, when you look at the underlying metrics, he had some of the biggest jumps in improvements in terms of in terms of power, in terms of play discipline, in terms of the stuff that you look at for candidates going from year one to year two. It didn't really get a ton of look during the, once the season was done, but there was a lot to like there and a lot to think that if he can continue to build on those metrics, he has a shot to be a really, really quietly good player in 2026. And since they didn't really do anything at third base, he has the opportunity to build off of that. So, the combination of momentum and opportunity are both in his really, in his strong favor going into the season. And I think he's kind of an interesting guy to take a flyer on.
Yeah, looking at the quality of contact, his average exit velocity and barrel rate took a huge step forward from year 1 to year 2. So definitely encouraging there for Colt Keith. Quick follow-up on him. Do you envision him as a player that will play every day, or does he start as a strong side platoon? And if he performs well, maybe he earns some opportunities against lefties. What do you see with the playing time here with Colt Keith?
Well, I think part of it depends on, right now, do they give him an opportunity to play against left-handed pitching? And some of that might depend on how that lefty specialist infield role pans out. Right now, they don't really have an established candidate there unless they do something here in the latter stages of the offseason. It's going to be probably some combination of, either Hao-Yu Lee or Max Anderson, neither of whom has played in the big leagues before. So, AJ Hinch has shown a willingness to let Colt play against select left-handers over his last couple, particularly last season. So, if the guy that would be the logical right-handed bat there is not established, I would suspect that, Colt will get at least some opportunities against left-handed pitching. How much might depend on how Max Anderson looks, how Yu Lee looks, how AJ wants to bring those guys along. But I think there's a ton of runway for Colt to get a lot of playing time there.
Max Anderson, interesting name there too. I think one to pay attention to in spring training. He had a huge Arizona Fall League as well. So interested to see what he could do. But yeah, obviously Colt Keith, someone they gave that extension to, still a young player and made some improvements last season. So hopefully can earn everyday playing time here in 2026. Big thanks to Jason Beck, who covers the Tigers for MLB.com. Make sure to check out his work and give him a follow on X at BeckJason and on Blue Sky at jasonbeck.bsky.social. For more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to our full-length podcast, Fantasy Baseball Today, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to our On the Beat team preview series, and we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.